The box sat on my doorstep like a silent sentinel, its glossy red paper shimmering faintly under the hazy glow of the street lamp. It hadn't been there an hour earlier when I'd returned from work, exhausted and hollow. Now it waited, innocent yet inexplicably foreboding. I glanced up and down the empty street. No sign of a delivery truck. No fluttering of footsteps retreating into the fog. The faint chill of February wrapped itself tighter around me as I crouched, fingers brushing the ribbon's perfect bow. A card was tucked beneath it, its surface unmarked except for my name, written in a delicate, curling script that I didn't recognize. For a moment, I considered leaving it there. A stranger's gift on a doorstep was hardly comforting, even on Valentine's, but curiosity, and something deeper, an odd compulsion, won out. I carried the box inside, its weight heavier than I expected. The house was dim and quiet, shadows pooling in the corners like sleeping things. As I set the box on the kitchen table and slid the ribbon free, a peculiar warmth seemed to radiate from it, pushing back the room's chill. The paper tore easily, revealing a simple white box beneath. Inside, nestled in black velvet, lay a single red rose and a heart-shaped charm the size of my palm. The rose was unnaturally vivid, its petals glistening as if wet, though my fingers came away dry when I touched them. The charm, however, was stranger still. It ticked faintly, a steady rhythm that matched the pulse in my wrists. Its surface was smooth and cool, yet as I lifted it, it warmed against my skin, almost imperceptibly. And then I felt it, a sharp, inexplicable ache deep in my chest, just to the left of my sternum. A phantom pain, as though an invisible thread had tightened around my heart. The sensation passed quickly, leaving only a lingering discomfort, but it was enough to make me put the charm down. I turned the card over in my hand. The back was blank. No message or signature, but a faint scent of roses clung to it. I rubbed my chest absently, staring at the charm as its ticking filled the silence of the room. The gift was beautiful, no doubt, but unease curled in the pit of my stomach. Who had sent it, and why? It didn't feel like the sort of gesture a secret admirer would make. It felt deliberate, purposeful, and despite my efforts to ignore it, the ache in my chest returned, softer now, but more insistent, in perfect time with the charm's rhythm. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the rose's vibrant red in the charm's slow, steady pulse, like a heartbeat. The faint ticking haunted me, even when I moved the charm to the farthest corner of the house. It was always there, just on the edge of hearing, like a whisper I couldn't escape. The next morning, the unease had settled into something deeper. My reflection in the bathroom mirror seemed off. At first, I thought it was exhaustion. The dark circles under my eyes, the hollow tightness in my expression. But as I brushed my teeth, I noticed something else. The reflection didn't quite match my movements. It was subtle, a hesitation so brief it could have been my imagination, but it was enough to make my heart skip. "Get a grip," I muttered, splashing water on my face. But when I looked back up, my reflection was staring at me. Staring, unblinking, as though it were waiting for something. I stumbled back, gripping the edge of the sink. The ache in my chest flared sharply, stealing my breath. For a moment, I felt untethered, as if I weren't alone in my own skin. Then the pain ebbed, and my reflection moved again, perfectly normal, perfectly mine. The rest of the day passed in a haze. At work, I couldn't focus. The steady ticking filled my thoughts, though I had left the charm at home, wrapped tightly in its velvet box. By evening, the shadows in the house felt heavier, pressing in like a weight I couldn't shake. I avoided the mirrors. The way their dark surfaces seemed to pulse faintly when I wasn't looking directly at them. As night fell, the ache in my chest grew worse. I sat on the couch, clutching at my shirt, feeling the phantom pull, like invisible hands reaching into my ribs. The ticking was louder now, filling the quiet house with its maddening rhythm. I tried music, television, anything to drown it out, but nothing worked. Desperation drove me to the charm. I unwrapped it and held it in my hand, its warmth seeping into my palm. For a moment, the ache in my chest eased, and I exhaled shakily. But then the shadows shifted. It was subtle at first, a flicker in the corner of my eye, the faint suggestion of movement in the darkened hallway. I turned, heart racing, but nothing was there. The ticking grew louder, faster, and I realized with a sick jolt that it wasn't coming from the charm anymore. It was coming from inside me. Panic flared, and I stumbled to the nearest mirror, needing to see, to confirm I was still myself. My reflection stared back, pale and wide-eyed, but as I watched, its expression shifted. A smile crept across its lips. Not mine, not the hesitant one I wore. It was a smile of triumph. And then it raised a hand and placed it over its chest. Over my chest, the ache became unbearable. The morning after my reflection's silent, triumphant smile, I left the house early, desperate for air and distance. The charm sat heavy in my pocket, its faint ticking mirroring the phantom ache in my chest. I had hoped that leaving it behind might sever the connection, but the thought of it, its strange warmth, the rhythmic pulse, felt tethered to me in ways I couldn't explain. Outside, the city was alive in its usual hum, people rushing past on sidewalks or sipping coffee in the glow of shop fronts, yet it all seemed muted, distant. My breath fogged in the chill air as I wandered aimlessly, my chest tightening with each step. Every now and then, I felt the charm grow warmer against my thigh, a subtle reminder of its presence. It felt alive. I turned a corner onto a quieter street and froze. A figure stood in the distance, a man dressed in a charcoal gray suit with an impeccably tailored jacket. He leaned casually against the frame of a shop window, as though he'd been waiting for me. He was thin, almost unnaturally so, and his pale face bore an expression of mild amusement. Though the street was lined with others going about their day, his eyes were fixed on me. I swallowed hard and kept walking, hoping to pass him unnoticed. But as I drew closer, he tipped his hat, a movement that sent a chill skittering down my spine. "You're carrying a heavy burden," he said, his voice smooth and low, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't place. I stopped, despite every instinct telling me to keep going. His words didn't feel like idle conversation. "I'm sorry," I managed, my voice unsteady. The man's lips curled into a small smile, but his eyes remained sharp, calculating. "The charm," he said simply. "I felt it before I saw you. Quite rare, those are. Dangerous, if handled poorly." My hand instinctively brushed the outline of the charm through my coat. "How do you know about it?" He stepped closer, and the shadows on the street seemed to deepen around him. "Let's just say, it's my business to know. I specialize in things that don't belong, in finding what's been misplaced." He motioned toward the shop behind him, its window displaying mannequins clothed in intricate garments. "Come in," he said. "We can discuss it further." Every nerve in my body screamed to refuse, to walk away. But there was something about the man, a magnetism that made ignoring him impossible. Reluctantly, I followed him inside. The air in the shop was heavy with the scent of mothballs and lavender, an odd combination that made my stomach churn. Rows of mannequins lined the walls, their smooth faces devoid of features, yet unsettlingly lifelike in their postures. They seemed to watch as I moved, their empty gazes following my every step. The man gestured toward a small table at the back of the shop. "Sit." I hesitated, but complied. He settled across from me, his long fingers steepled under his chin. "The charm you carry," he began, "isn't just an ornament. It's a vessel, a tether." His pale eyes studied me, unblinking. "Tell me, have you felt different? An ache, perhaps? Shadows where there shouldn't be?" My throat tightened. "Yes," I whispered. He nodded, as though confirming something he already knew. "It has claimed you. The charm has taken your heart, or rather the essence of it. That ticking you hear? It's the sound of your life being siphoned away. The room seemed to spin. How do I stop it?" The man leaned back, his gaze piercing. "You'll need to go to the source. Whoever sent the charm is the only one who can break its hold. But," he added, his tone darkening, "you may not like what you find." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded slip of paper. "This will guide you to where it began." I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. Scrawled in the same curling script as the card from the charm was an address I didn't recognize. "When you reach the end," the man said, "you'll have a choice to make. Be careful. It's not just your heart at stake." The address led me to the heart of the city, to a street I'd never walked before. The buildings here were older, their stone facades darkened by time and soot. The charm pulsed steadily in my pocket, a rhythm that quickened as I approached a narrow alleyway flanked by wrought iron gates. Beyond the gates stood a structure that didn't belong. It rose like a monolith, its spires twisting unnaturally against the gray sky. The doors, tall and heavy, bore carvings of intricate gears interlocked with vine-like patterns. The air here felt thin, electric. I pushed the doors open, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Inside was a cathedral, but not one devoted to any god I knew. The walls were lined with brass mechanisms, their gears turning in silent synchronization. The pews were filled, not with worshippers, but with mechanical figures, lifelike and unsettling, their bodies a blend of flesh and metal. At the center of the room stood an altar, and behind it, cloaked in velvet and shadow, was the one I had been searching for. The charm in my pocket pulsed violently, as though it recognized its maker. The figure turned, revealing a face half hidden by a mask. "You've come," it said, its voice resonant and layered, like two voices speaking at once. "What have you done to me?" I demanded, clutching my chest. The figure smiled, a gesture both kind and cruel. "I've only borrowed what you hold most dear. Your heart is special." My knees weakened, but I stayed upright. "I want it back." The figure stepped closer, its shadow stretching unnaturally long. "Ah," it murmured, "but to reclaim it, you must give something in return. Are you prepared to pay the price?" The air grew heavy, the ticking filling my ears. I realized then that the cathedral was alive, its mechanisms turning in anticipation. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, though my voice trembled. The figure's smile widened. "Then let us begin." The figure extended its hand, palm up, and from the depths of the altar rose a small pedestal. Upon it sat an object encased in glass, a mechanical heart. Its surface was sleek and polished, its gears visible beneath a translucent casing. The steady rhythm of its ticking filled the air, perfectly synchronized with the pulse in my chest. My heart. "You feel its pull, don't you?" the figure said, circling the pedestal like a predator observing prey. "It calls to you because it is still yours, though it no longer resides within you." I stepped forward, every muscle taut with unease. "What do you want from me?" The figure tilted its head, the velvet hood slipping slightly to reveal a glint of something metallic beneath, part human, part machine. "To return what was taken, you must complete the connection. The charm was the first link. Now you must offer the second." A cold wind seemed to swirl through the cathedral, though the air was perfectly still. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure gestured to the mechanisms lining the walls, their movements slow and deliberate, as though every gear, every cog, was alive. "Your essence binds the heart to you, yet it also fuels the cathedral. To sever that bond and reclaim what is yours, you must choose. Either restore the balance and leave this place incomplete, or take your heart and leave the cathedral to crumble." I stared at the mechanical heart, its rhythmic ticking hypnotic. The ache in my chest grew unbearable, as though it were tearing itself apart to rejoin what it had lost. "What happens if I leave it?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. The figure's voice was calm, almost soothing. "You will continue as you are, tethered, your heart's essence draining bit by bit to power this place. Over time, the connection will consume you, leaving behind only what you see around you." It motioned to the mechanical figures in the pews. I felt a rush of nausea, my gaze darting to the lifelike forms. Their faces were eerily familiar, each bearing a faint trace of humanity. Were these people, once, visitors like me who had stood where I now stood? "And if I take it back?" I asked. The figure stepped closer, the light catching the strange texture of its face. "The cathedral cannot survive without its anchor. It will collapse, releasing all it holds." I shivered, not entirely understanding what that meant, but the weight of its words pressed down on me like a physical force. I approached the pedestal, the mechanical heart seeming to glow faintly, as though it recognized me. My fingers trembled as I reached out, stopping just short of the glass casing. The charm in my pocket pulsed wildly, the rhythm so fast it felt like a warning. "Be certain," the figure said softly. "What you choose will shape more than your own fate." I closed my eyes, the ache in my chest sharp and insistent. I thought of the charm, of the shadows that had haunted me, of the reflection that no longer obeyed my movements. My heart, my essence, had been stolen, but in its place was a tether that reached far deeper than I had understood. I opened my eyes and withdrew my hand. "If I leave it here, can I still live?" The figure nodded once. "You will, though not as you were. The connection will bind you to the cathedral, but it will also protect you from the emptiness." The choice hung heavy in the air. I turned away from the heart, the ache lessening as I distanced myself. "Then I leave it," I said, my voice trembling. "Let it stay where it belongs." The figure inclined its head, a hint of approval in its inhuman gaze. A wise choice, though not without its cost. As I stepped back, the cathedral seemed to exhale. The gears slowed, their turning steady and sure. The mechanical heart grew dimmer, its glow fading as though it were settling into its place. "You may go," the figure said, its form melting into the shadows of the altar. "But know this, the heart will always call to you, though it is no longer yours." The doors opened silently behind me, the cold night air rushing in to meet me. I stepped outside, the sound of the ticking fading as the cathedral's towering spires dissolved into the fog. When I reached the street, I realized the ache in my chest was gone, replaced by a strange, hollow peace. The charm in my pocket was cool now, silent as a stone. As I walked away, I glanced at my reflection in a shop window. It stared back, perfectly normal, perfectly mine. But deep in its eyes, I saw a faint glint of something metallic, a flicker of light that didn't belong. The heart might have stayed, but its tether remained, a reminder that some choices cannot be unmade.